My name's Frank McLeod. I work for WSP UK and I am the Head of Project Technology. What does that mean? I don't know yet. But it does mean if your email doesn't work, it's got nothing to do with me, right? So it is about sort of how do we use tools to make us more efficient? How do we use tools to align more with client needs? So the presentation I'm going to give, I've put one tall building in the back of the presentation for you. I felt obliged, but it's actually not about buildings and assets as such. It's about the information and how we manage it. So we're trying to look at what is the purpose of using information modeling in our daily work. How do we work? How do we align it with clients? And how do we deliver more value to those clients? So the presentation is titled Purpose Driven. And what we actually mean by that is saying to a client, we had to take the F word out of this apparently, that we normally put in. So what's your problem? So we're actually trying to say, how is it we solve your problem? And hopefully it's got a question mark at the end of it rather than an exclamation mark. So it's very much focused on the client and what we're trying to do for them. And I just want to share that approach with you. So my objective is very simple. For this presentation is just to share what we are trying to do. We perceive information modeling as part of the overall life cycle. So in the middle there's a life cycle there which goes from demand round to dispose. You can put whatever words you like in there. What we do is we wrap around the project 6 stages of what we call the phases of information modeling. And they go from in design, some of the terms, it's obvious what we're talking about and what we're doing in those phases. In design, in source. In source we mean both the strategy for procurement, the procurement of elements within the building and their integration of their information into the project to enable an efficient installation in the field. We then look at accept, how we start to move that information and move the physical asset across towards the end user so they can be used in use. At the top of the diagram you can see the word in need. We have no idea what that means. We know our clients do something before it becomes a project and suddenly decide to build something, and we know that's based on decisions made from information. And we believe that as we become good at the life cycle, then we will be able to use the information we generate both to inform early doors the high value questions that the clients are asking, and also to take the information in use to inform them as to how their buildings are performance, when it needs to be augmented or changed, and how it should work. So we very much see the structure of what we're putting in place feeds the in need piece. And we put it in a hierarchy. And the hierarchy that we've borrowed is from that document, PAS 1192. We look at PAS 1192, that's a set of protocols that's defined for use on government-funded projects. We're bringing it across into the private sector merely to act as a structure. We don't use it. It can become quite cumbersome and burdensome if you start to follow it too closely. We don't move away from it, but what we do is make sure that it's efficient for the project. And the way we've done that is we've started to hierarchy the model. I want to walk away from the mics, but I know I'm going to shout at you. All right. So what we've done is we break a project down into a series of, into a hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy is this thing called an employer's information requirements. It is a set of documents and protocols which define everything the client could possibly want from a building. Oh, beg your pardon. Everything a client could possibly want from an information model. Now, you can try this at home yourself. Go to the client and ask for it. He will burst into tears, all right? Because it's impossible to write, yeah? And you don't know what it is. And we're talking about projects that scan years, so there's no way of knowing it. So what we do is we recognize as designers, we're quite good at taking briefs and understanding complex problems and coming up with solutions. So what we do is we develop an information model execution plan, sometimes called the Building Information Execution Plan, sometimes called the BEP. And what that is it takes a brief from the client and it responds to it, and it defines an environment which we call the information modeling environment. And within that, we've broke it down into chunks. This is completely in line with PAS 1192. There is a project information model. So that is all the information modeling, all the geometry and the attributes that you will require for the capital phase of a project, the delivery of the asset. And it moves into an asset information model, which is all the information you would require in the operational stage of a development. And within those, we break them down again so that in a project information model, we have a design intent model. Unfortunately, its acronym is DIM, and that's the bit the designers put together. And it moves into a virtual construction model. And it's quite important that what we're seeing, we're not putting people in boxes. You can work in any box you want, right? But what we're seeing is the design intent models are becoming too detailed. We're starting to do things because the software will, not because we should, right? And it's trying to understand what the purpose of each of these models is. When you move into an asset information model, you end up with an asset register, which are just digital 3D drawings, if you like, or a full-blown operation and maintenance model, which would be a cloud-based tool for running a building from. And if you jump back a little bit into the phases, you can see that depending where you are in the phase of the building, you'll be in one of those models or another. And what we're actually saying for clients, not all clients want to pass right round the life cycle. So what you'll find is some projects will actually only do in design. Other projects will only do in the field, or those both. So we're starting to say that it's both purpose-driven, but it's also modular. So the information modeling regime you provide for a particular client is based upon the phases that they require, the hierarchy that they require. So it's a set of modules that we predefine, but it's made specifically for the project. We're also shown this maturity level. And if you talk to people, they'll say, oh, we're maturity level 2. And, oh, we've just hit 3, and things like that. Personally, load of bollocks, right? That's our maturity diagram. And as you go into our business, if you go into certain offices, you'll see a lot of curly tails. So within our business, there are guys with pencils, scribbling out notes and calculators. I haven't found a slide rule yet, but it'll be there. And there are also guys with rather sharp tools who are quite smart at what they do. So what we do is we look at a project, rather than predefining a maturity level, we look at what a project requires and what level of maturity we need to be at to add the value at that project, and that's our maturity level. And generally it's winding up. We got a few emails coming in from outside, and on the bottom of them they had BIM accredited to level 2 written on, certified level 2. And it went crazy in our business because they're asking, where do you get the certification from? And so all I did was I took the same logo, wrote 2.5 and sent it back to them, because there is no certification. So the question was asked, what level of maturity are we in this world? And I said, well, when you walk through the door, we're at about 1.67. By 11:15, we're down to 1.1. So the maturity level is what you are performing. Everything has to be focused on what the client requires, not what we're just driven to do. And we deploy that into our design process. So what's very important to us is we have a lot of good designers within our business, and they are worried that they stop becoming designers and become technologists. And we're saying, no, we want you to design. We want you to be efficient at what you do. We are effectively employed as designers. That's why people come to us. So there is a design process that goes on, and we're saying that is what the designers are all about. All we're trying to do is to wrap that process into an environment where they are harmonized with each other. So we're simpatico. When you're producing information, you are thinking about the rest of the team as well. You may be asked to do things in a way which won't immediately benefit you solely, it will benefit others. So it's a very collaborative environment. And each of those little activities has some technology attached to it, and we're saying, please use the tools you want. So we're very agnostic. So we love the Bentley tools, we love the Autodesk and the ArchiCAD tools, but actually the tool we use is the tool that's right for that particular job. And what we're asking is that the interoperability of of technology is that we work together at the beginning of a project to allow us all to use the tools of choice. Yeah? And we often find, in fact, more times than not, there are multiple tools on projects, not a single source. And the reason we're doing that is we're asking this technology, we're asking these guys to make us stronger as designers. If you put a bad designer in the end of this, you just get a very fast, bad designer. What we're finding is that it allows us to consider more iterations. It allows us to understand more variables, so it makes us a stronger designer. But we don't want the information modeling aspects, we don't want the software to start to tell us how to design. We already know how to do that. It's about giving us more pace. Yeah. And we look at the dynamics of a team. This is quite important. It is a team sport, it's a collaborative. These are two real projects. I'll not tell you what they are. And we look at the dynamics of the team and their attitude towards both working together but also working with technology and also aligning with the needs of others. And we create maps of them. And you can see one has got a broad alignment, a broad diagram and a broad alignment, and the other one has got quite a bit of variation in. So those are real projects, and on the first one we actually went to the client and said, you should do information modeling, you should use technology to its full, you should go beyond 3D and you should information modeling to develop this project. There is a difference in the experience levels of some of the organizations, but the manner in which they are aligned, they will support each other and they will drive this through. On the second project, which was a commercial project, there was so much misalignment between the organizations. The client wants to use information modeling and technology on the project, and our advice to them is, don't do it. Use some 3D geometry, create a wonderful building, get some coordination going, have a good time, but don't try to use information modeling for this project. It will pull itself apart. So it's very important that it's not just the technology and the client, the team has to be balanced and able to work together, want to work together. So it is a collaborative environment that we work in. And what we do is each stage, depending upon what work plan you're working to, RIB, CIC, GRIP, whatever, where we sit with the client, when we suggest you sit with the client early on, and for each of the stages you are choosing to put onto your project, you clearly define what the purpose is. What is it you're trying to achieve with information modeling? And set some hard goals. So we've actually mocked up what the answer will look like as almost a sample board of what the future will be when we get there. Because what we're finding is you can describe this information modeling very well, and you can both be sitting with completely different views of what you're expecting to get. So you can quite often see that in some form the functionality that you've requested is delivered to you, but you're disappointed about the manner of it. So quite often we're seeing on a lot of information models a surprise at the end of it. I thought it would do this, I thought it would refresh the milk in my fridge, and it doesn't. And therefore you've got to be very clear as to what it is you're trying to do. So we actually spend a lot of time being brutal to ourselves about writing down the purpose in plain language, defining what the activities would be in that stage, and creating some goals for ourselves. And that's how you know that you're being successful in delivering to the client. And if you're not looking for value in the field, then there is no purpose in it, then you shouldn't be doing activities. Because we're also finding that the word BIM, we get requests to us saying, we want some BIM. We've even had one organization say, I need BIM, 2 A4 sheets should be enough, you know. And so it's, you know, we've also got contracts which are very large and very detailed about structural, mechanical, electrical, public health, and then it says, do BIM at the bottom. So we have to be definitive about what we mean and how it adds value. Yeah? And that's only because it's new and emerging. You know? And all of that gets put into a plan. So the funny green document is PAS 1192, so the backbone of it is to align with that, so it's starting to try and get a common standard. And on a project, you need an execution plan, which clearly defines in the funny spreadsheet who does what and when and why. And the idea of that is to try and to avoid overburdening designers, particularly in the conceptual stage, with a whole load of information modeling stuff. We want the designers to be the designers, and we want them to be creative. That's why they've been selected. We don't want to burden them. So we talk about free attributes. We'll have anything that's free, we'll take it, but we won't necessarily come to you and ask you to add other things in there. And so we talk about paradigms. So when you come onto a project, we believe, depending on who you are, you will have a different paradigm, a different view. You'll be expecting to see different things. And we agree what those paradigms are. The common ones we see are author and create. Hello, that's me. So we will see a lot of geometry being modeled, a lot of sort of functionality being understood, a lot of clash stuff going on. Clash is not a conceptual tool. We know what clash is. We haven't fixed it yet. We see analyze and appraise, where people will want to take the information and understand what it does. They may be looking at lighting or energy or time or cost, but they don't particularly want to get emburdened in the authoring and creating. They just want the information to be given to them in a simple manner so they can do their work. In the same way, implement and control, where you're deploying it on site, you want to do snagging, you want to monitor plan versus actual, you want part of the procurement process, you want to understand packaging, then they really need to be able to get hold of that information without putting all those requirements as a burden into one of the other paradigms. And the client needs to very clearly be able to see what's happening so he can give direction, and ultimately, if he's an end user, is to operate the facility. So we create what we call a digital nervous system on a project to allow different paradigms to exercise the same information, but have it brought to them in a manner that is useful for their business and their activities. So the last thing we want to see is the client having to buy a copy of Revit or a copy of EcoSim to actually understand his project. The information should flow to him in a different way. There should be no cost for the technology. The information should be easily flowing towards them. And unfortunately, that ends up with a wacky diagram with lots of arrows on it, which we see as being BIM in black and white. And what that diagram's doing is basically saying, you can see, I'm going to wander across again. Will this come on automatically? Yes, it will. So there's a geometry piece for designers where we just want them to create geometry. So the tools they use, we just want to be very efficient at generating geometry, being conceptual. There aren't any real conceptual tools out there. And we're now starting to hear of some conceptual designs being modified to meet the limitations of software, which is crazy. So the design should be just out there. And all information that's produced is brought into a federated world. And in a federated world, we will bring information out of design, so we don't burden design, and we might federate it to coordinate, and we'll add different information in here. So we don't ask the designers to add information, we'll add it in over here. And we'll bring information across to simulate time or cost or carbon, whatever you want. We'll add in other attributes at this point where we'll be adding in cost and time. So none of these information is put into the geometry model, the designer's world. So we don't want them typing in flow rates of things and serial numbers of things and burdening them. Or we might bring it across into a high-end resolution to do fly-throughs and renderings and the like, and we'll be bringing in information about lux levels and reflectivity and materials and the like. And we are able to then take that information in a cleansed manner and place it into what we call collect and report, an area where anybody can access information either from a mobile point of view or from a desktop, but with a low-cost or no-cost application. So this is the area where we see the client and the end user using it, and people coming onto site, visitors to the project, if you like, people who aren't doing one of the production roles, and we would expect them to be able to get information without having to pay lots of money for software. So very much it's about the federated area creating that. And the way that works with our previous paradigms, is we start to see that this area is about authoring and creating. So the tools you start to see there are EcoSim, ArchiCAD, Revit, all those sort of things, Rhino, that sort of a device. And you come across into the federated area, which is where the analyze and appraise is going on, and you're starting to see things like Studio Max, and you're starting to see things like Synchro coming in here, Navis, Navigator, all those sort of tools. And at the top, in the implement and control, that's where you're starting to see the cloud-based information working. And what we're finding is if you set up project clouds, you can put the information up there. We can keep that information as up to date as you like, so you can update it once a year or once every 15 minutes. It's up to you what you do. And that's where we allow people access straight into the design. So we're starting to talk about continual work in progress, whereas designers across companies, we don't issue things to each other. We just allow the information to grow and develop. Of course, we've got milestones. Of course, we've got data drops. Of course, we put gates in place and understand where we are. But between those gates, we actually allow the information to flow so that people can access it freely, so it's open and shareable, and understand exactly where the design is. It's interesting as a designer because what you tend to do is if you're running a little bit behind, you put the pressure on towards the end, you issue information, maybe it's not quite what it should be, and then you sort of do a little dance, all right? What we're doing here is with continual work in progress, it becomes very brutal. So you look at it and you see where we are, and you know what we've done, and you know what we haven't done. And therefore, we're saying that becomes more open, more shareable, and we're finding that openness and that honesty breeds collaboration, and that sort of breeds a clear understanding. What we're getting from the projects we've worked on, like London Bridge Place, is where the client is saying the biggest benefit, which surprised us, was the clarity and openness of information. Understanding where he was the greatest benefit he was getting from allowing us to play with information modeling. And direct and operate. So we allow or encourage the client to sit right in the middle where we immerse them in information. So we're even using a product or a platform called Unity. Unity is the platform that Xbox runs on. So we create games in the projects. It is just gaming software. You bring your model in, you turn it into a game. So instead of going into the dungeon of death, you go into London Bridge Station, and instead of picking up the Sword of Doom, you try and catch the 628. All right? And what that means is, so why we're doing that? Because there is no software cost to the client at all when he does this. And because it's a game, it is intuitive. There is no learning curve on how to fire up a big program and get the model to turn around. It is intuitive how you use it. So we're spending a lot of time trying to understand how do you get these paradigms, how do you get people to be able to come in and understand where we are without having to invest heavily in IT, either training or hard or software. And so the platform, and there's your tall building, by the way, just so you can have one. So what we do is we talk about a platform and we talk about products. So the platform is what we work on, the environment that we've created. And we're saying that environment has to be agnostic. It has to be open completely. That's very difficult. It's more of a cultural thing. It needs to have a common data environment that we share information in. It's very structured in how it puts that information. It's a federated world, so we are nowhere near yet what's called maturity level 3, where we're all working on the same model. We work on our models and we share them, and we see that going on for quite a while. It's holistic, so everybody who's in it has to play. We can't have any lone traders, and it aligns with PAS 1192. And within that platform, we deploy products or tools, software. And it took a long time in our own business because our own business, we were saying at an accounting level, why don't you just pick one tool, we'll do a deal and we'll get it for nothing. So I took my little toolbox in from home and I opened it and went, look, there's not one tool in the toolbox, there's enough to do a range of jobs. So within the toolbox, there will always be multiple tools. talking to David before the meeting, within their organisation, they will often use multiple tools on the same project within their own discipline because that's the most efficient way to move information around. And so we see those tools, therefore, the plea to the software houses is they need to be agile, so the ability to be shared and moved and information to pass around. The need to, when you're selecting them, consider the client's needs and what he's trying to do. You need to get a balance in the team. We have very few projects where everybody uses the same tool. So you need to understand, you can't force people to use other tools on a project. So we need to get that balance right. It needs to be output aligned. Where is it going and what is it trying to do? The software is, my phone is flashing. The software is an enabler. So it's not the end of the journey, it's actually part of the journey. It's just an enabler. The use of tools has to be very cost effective, so it has to bring a benefit to the project. And we spend a lot of time talking about legacy and how data works and what versions the software is going to pass through in the life of the building and beyond. And that's another reason to allow the projects to get out of the big authoring tools when it becomes to an end user, because you don't want to create that legacy for the client. He just wants access to his information. And that's all I wanted to talk to you about today.